What's going on YouTube? It's Deej back again with another video, and today we are capping off my latest 2023 three-round NFL mock draft. Today we're talking about the third round, and excited to have you back on the channel. If you missed round one, round two, be sure to go back and check those out. And before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and showcase the best players available still on the board, just so you know kind of where we're at. But again, you get a good idea of what I've done over the last two videos, both by watching them, but also you'll be able to see the latest picks in the bottom right of your screen. But welcome back to the channel. Like if you enjoyed today's video, subscribe if you are new and want some more draft content in your life. But with all that down, let's start talking about the third round of my NFL mock draft. We'll start with the Chicago Bears. We've got Jalen Carter for sure, and then we went offensive heavy yesterday. Let's go ahead and add an edge rusher. This team can certainly get better there on the edge. Bicho Jalari, a guy who I've had go as high as end of first round. So I think here at 64, supreme value, adding a speed rusher who can win with bend, and even added that inside counter this past year at LSU. I think a guy who's getting better and better and also has plenty of playing time. So I think a guy who can make an impact right away for Chicago. Then we get to Houston at 65. I finally made a mock draft where I give Houston a tight end. I am so sorry it took so long, Texans fans, but yeah, they can get better at the position. They can look for an upgrade there. Kincaid was a huge part of that Utah offense. Good hands, good athletic ability, solid after the catch as well. I think it's a big component of his game as well. So, yeah, just a really nice, worthwhile addition. And if we're talking about D'Amico Ryans, coming from San Francisco, I think he's got an eye for tight end being a big part of the offense. I mean, not saying it's locked in, but also they did bring in Bobby Slowick, who was the pass game coordinator in San Francisco, to be the OC. So he might be thinking in mind that he wants good tight end in his offense. And I think Kincaid in the third round is a really nice addition to that squad. So we get to the Arizona Cardinals. Let's go corner. We've gone edge. We've gone interior offensive line. Let's go give them a talented corner from Michigan, DJ Turner, who's coming off a really nice season, solid size, again, right around that 6 foot, 185 to 190, maybe 92 pounds, and just a guy who played really, really well this last year at Michigan. Arizona can certainly get better there on the perimeter, pairing him up with hopefully Byron Murphy being re-signed, and then Budda Baker just kind of flying around the field, doing a lot of different things, and I start to feel that much better about Jonathan Gannon and his secondary in Arizona. And also, that's the thing, like, he's coming from Philadelphia, where he had a really good secondary, right? So that's going to be a priority. And I think definitely by round 3, there's going to be a corner off the board taken by Arizona, excuse me. Then we get to back-to-back picks from the Denver Broncos. And we're going to start with Matthew Bergeron, a guy. Now, I mentioned this last week. I'm really excited to dive back into tape. Yeah, just a guy who, almost like Isaiah Foskey, and how I described him in yesterday's video. Not a master or elite at one thing, but just solid, stable. I feel like he can play right away. And actually, we're going to talk about an interior offensive lineman, and not too far off in the future here. That's kind of the same thing. I can trust this guy to be a good enough starter. Minimum, just like, hey, this guy can be league average. And maybe there's more in the tank for Bergeron, but I'm thinking this is a guy who can be stable, solid, and play that right tackle spot is kind of what I have in mind here for Denver, solidifying that offensive line. Could use some work on the interior depending on what happens with Dalton Reisner, how I feel about Lloyd Cushenberry, and some of those other pieces. Nonetheless, let's solidify right tackle. Let's draft a solid, stable guy like Bergeron. And then at 68, we're going to go with Jordan Battle. I like him as that Kareem Jackson replacement, that box safety, but also pairing him up with Justin Simmons is a really fun duo there. And a team that, obviously under Ejiro Evero and then Vic Fangio before that. A lot of, cover 4, a lot of those too high shells, depending on what they want to do moving forward. That could certainly still be in the future. So I think pairing up Simmons and Battle makes a lot of sense there. Maybe not the most gifted athlete, but really instinctual in coverage and a really good tackler as well. So, kind of where he loses a little bit in regards to speed, he makes up for it in so many different ways. And actually comped him last year to Xavier McKinney, which is tough because you don't want a helmet scout here, but McKinney wasn't necessarily the most gaudy athlete at the safety spot, just knows how to play the position. Really instinctual, high football IQ, and Battle brings a lot of the same stuff to the table. Then we get to the Rams at pick 69, and we're going to go edge here. We went interior offensive line, and now we're going to go edge. I've done it the other way around. I think either way is totally live for the Rams, but I'm going to give it Derek Hall, a guy who I've had go late first round, plenty of times throughout the second, so also getting good value here with Hall at 69. Nice. But, I think this team just needs more help in the pass rush department. Like, Aaron Donald is a alien, but he can't do it all by himself. And Leonard Floyd, despite having a cap hit north of $20 million, ain't really that guy. So, yeah, let's try to get some reinforcements. Let's try to get that defense back to where it was in that Super Bowl run. And, Derek Hall is not going to be Von Miller. He's not going to have that force multiplier effect that Miller does. Nonetheless, it's another guy that can work into the rotation, a speed rusher, can attack the outside shoulder of tackles. Let's try to get some additional pass rush to that defense and try to clean up the play of that front seven. Let me get to the Raiders at pick 70. I have been for years trying to give this team a difference maker at defensive tackle, and I'm going to go give him one of the 2 interior guys from Texas, if I could find him. There we go. Moro Ojomo. I don't know why he's 228. To me, he's one of the most NFL-ready defensive tackles. And strictly as a nose, he's the number 3 nose in this class to me, behind Ika and Keanu Benton. Even just ahead of Mozzie Smith. I think Mozzie, with his athletic ability, though, brings a lot of interesting upside. But Ojomo here for the Raiders, it's like plug and play. That's your nose-stopping or your run-stopping nose tackle. He wasn't great at the Shrine Bowl, per se. Maybe I wanted a little bit more out of him there. But nonetheless, I think a guy who's ready to roll and be a run stopper, maybe he won't be anything more than that. But for the Raiders and how bad they've been against the run, I think that's something you have to consider here in the 3rd round. And then we get to the Saints here at pick 71, and I gotta have Tanner McKee go somewhere. We'll have to wait and see. I'm sorry, Saints fans, if this irritates you, but you don't have Derek Carr on the roster yet. Right now it's Jameis Winston and so let's go ahead and address that position. I do think Tanner McKee is going to be a better pro than he was a college player. Michael Wilson played 26 games over his 5-year career, so McKee didn't really have that number 1 wide receiver. Also had a pretty putrid offensive line, had a head coach that tenure was kind of going stale with David Shaw. So I think he's dealt a lot of bad cards, and I think at the NFL level, especially look at the draft we've already put together, considering we added Michael Mayer in the 1st round. Talking about Michael Mayer, you're talking about Michael Thomas hopefully being back healthy, Chris Olave showcasing he'd be a 1 if Thomas isn't out there, Rashid Shaheed seemingly going for like 40-50 yards every time he touches the ball, Alvin Kamara, a good offensive line. That's a place where I think Tanner McKee could have a lot of success. So, especially in the 3rd round, I think it's worth taking the swing of the bat. But again, we'll see if they sign Derek Carr and it's a multi-year deal. Then obviously this is off the table. Next up is the Tennessee Titans at pick 72. And you know what? I misspoke. I was confusing the Titans with the Lions. So there's going to be a guard we talk about later that I thought I was going to give the Titans. I'm so sorry I hyped that up over the last couple of days. But I do think this team can get a lot better on the edge. So Adetomiwa Adebawore, to me, makes a lot of sense. A guy who looked really good at the Senior Bowl and lined up all over the defensive line for Northwestern. But at 6'2", I'd like to see him kick out wide to the edge. I think honestly, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and cut Bud Dupree. $20 million cap hit, $10 million dead cap. So if you cut him, you're saving 10 of that. So I think once you get to that 50% savings to dead cap ratio, I think you make the move. And this is a team that, Taylor Lewan's almost certainly gone. Robert Woods, to me, likely gone. Zach Cunningham, got to be gone. And then you add Bud Dupree in the mix, and this team can save about 45, close to 50 million against the cap. So edge, I think, is going to be a need. And maybe it's Danico Autry full-time starter there, but I also think he's better as a 3-4 D end, despite being pretty good at the edge last year. So let's go ahead and add Adebawore at least into the rotation for a Tennessee team that I think can get better on the edge. Next, the Houston Texans. I'm going to go interior offensive line. I said I thought about it at 12, but, I don't love O'Cyrus Torrence there. So let's go ahead and give him Joe Tippmann, a center that a lot of people really like from Wisconsin. Another one of those guys who's just solid, steady. I feel like can come up and play at the next level. He's actually not the interior offensive lineman I was talking about earlier. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit, but nonetheless, I think Tippmann can be plug and play, upgrade there at center over Justin Britt, and just trying to further cement the future of that offensive line for Houston. And kind of like what I talked about with Luke Weipler in yesterday's video for the Rams. It's like, don't underestimate the addition of a really quality center and how that can be a stabilizing factor across the offensive line. Who knows, like maybe Tippmann coming in and playing center makes Kenyon Green that much better. I mean, who knows? Maybe that also just comes from him being in year 2. Hard to judge. We're not in the building. So let's go ahead and address the position where they can certainly get better. And Tippmann, I think, round 3, that's a good spot for him to go. Next is the New York Jets at pick 74. And kind of hit on his name yesterday, but dude, there are a few linebackers as twitchy as Dorian Williams in this year's class. I mean, he's a little small and he'll get blocked out of plays. Like in the run game, he can leave something to be desired. But I think if you have him and CJ Mosley on the field at the same time, those weaknesses kind of counteract one another, but this dude flies. I mean, this dude has speed for days. So adding that type of an athlete into a scheme, Robert Saleh, like him as the coverage guy, I mean, I'm not calling him Fred Warner. I definitely don't want to do that because we're talking about a guy taken in the 3rd round, but nonetheless, I mean, it's an interesting add. We know how big of a part that role plays in that defense. So if Dorian Williams can be 50% of Fred Warner, then damn, that defense gets that much scarier. So would love to see them add this type of an athlete that can just fly around the field, be an impact player in coverage, even though he will get blocked out of plays in the run game. That's what you have CJ Mosley there for. Let's go ahead and add a freak athlete that can cover a ton of ground into that zone-heavy defense. Falcons are up next at pick 75. I'm going to go with a wide receiver that I actually don't have ranked as high as some of the other guys still available, like a Rashee Rice or even like a Michael Wilson. I'm going to go Jayden Reed. The reason I did that is because wide receivers can be tough. It comes down to what flavor you need. And, I look at Atlanta, I'm like, you got Kyle Pitts, who's this, tight end wide receiver hybrid, runs 4.4, big body. You got Drake London, who doesn't do the deep stuff. He, he's a yards after the catch and, short, intermediate route running, really good route runner. And again, a guy who's hard to bring down after the catch. who's that guy who could bring that speed element? You know, I look at Jaden Reed, 5'11". He's guy who's pretty good at a lot of different things, looked really good at the Senior Bowl, really sharp route running. I think he could bring that speed element. So I've had sometimes Kayshon Boutte fall this far to 75. If Jalen Hyatt were here, I would love that. But I think Jaden Reed could also be that over the top, that speed guy. But it does a little bit of everything for Atlanta and opens up that passing game. Getting him an extra wide receiver, I think, is a solid priority here in round 3. Next, New England Patriots. As promised, we are going to go off the tackle. I did not goof this one. Blake Freeland. You know, I had somebody comment on this video and perfect. I don't want to say perfect comp, but body type wise, yeah, Blake Freeland kind of is like Nate Solder. So New England kind of needing a tackle, draft Blake Freeland, have Trent Brown then move back to right tackle. I'm here for it. I dig it. So I'm going to go ahead and make Blake Freeland the pick here. He'll struggle against speed and, you know, the shorter, smaller edge rushers, but so does just about every tackle that's 6'8". So it takes, you know, pros and cons with somebody being that size, but nonetheless, this does kind of feel like a New England tackle. So I like that fit a fair amount. Next is the Miami Dolphins at 77. We're going to go Sam Laporta here. Now, I know you see Iowa tight end, and you're thinking, oh my God, TJ Hawkinson, solid blocker. George Kittle, best blocking tight end in the league, perhaps. Yeah, Sam Laporta's not that. He's fine. He can block. He can. But yeah, definitely at the strength of his game, he's a good athlete, he's a good receiver, and he's a good route runner. Like, that's where he'll make his NFL money. So adding a guy who is a fluid athlete into an offense, and I think much more of a fit and a better blocker than Mike Gesicki, because, you know, as much as Sam Laporta is not, you know, a high-end blocking tight end, he's not Darnell Washington, who I had Miami taking the second round last week. He's a better blocker than Mike Gesicki. Because Mike Gesicki, he's basically a slot wide receiver, but he's huge. Yeah, I do think this is a guy who better fits what Mike McDaniels wanted, that tight end spot. And you're adding another great athlete. And we've already added Jahmyr Gibbs, a guy with a ton of speed in the backfield. So adding another high-end athlete and some speed at the tight end position on top of Waddle and Hill and Gibbs in this scenario. Yeah, I mean, I am absolutely here for that Miami offense. Green Bay at pick 78. I'm going to Chris Smith here. I've made this selection a couple times. If you're a Packers fan, like, how big of a priority is safety? Because my thinking is, well, Adrian Amos is a free agent this year. Darnell Savage will be a free agent next year. Feels like something that could be a need long term. They could also go Tyke Smith, who is this, you know, nickel corner safety hybrid for Georgia, maybe as a Rasul Douglas kind of contingency, or as a way to cut Rasul Douglas, save some money this year and even more next year. I'm kind of thinking Chris Smith maybe could do that. Maybe even rotate Darnell Savage into that role. That would be really interesting, because that dude could lay the thump. So I'd love to see him in the box and just laying the boom. I don't know if he quite has that type of coverage ability, though. So, you know, it comes down to your opinion there. But Chris Smith, I think, is kind of that safety contingency. And maybe you do play Darnell Washington, that big nickel type of role. But I think this is the guy you draft. And he's a really good player and a really good free safety there at Georgia, transfer from West Virginia. I might be getting Tyke and him mixed up, but I'm 99% sure that Chris Smith is the safety that went to West Virginia, then transferred to Georgia, and he was solid on one of the best defenses in college football history of the last 2 years. So, yeah, a really good player, and I think could become an eventual starter there for Green Bay, depending on what happens with Amos and Savage. Especially with Amos getting a little bit up there in age, I could see him being the guy maybe they part ways with, and then extend Savage. And then if it's Chris Smith as the deep safety, Savage is kind of the strong safety, the box guy, I think that's a nice pairing. Colts then at pick 79. Emil Ekiyor is going to be my pick here. I think this is a plug-and-play right guard. You already have a future Hall of Famer there at left guard and Quentin Nelson. So, Emil Ekiyor, multi-year starter at right guard for Alabama. You know, he may not be as, you know, insane as some of previous Alabama interior offensive linemen have been, but nonetheless, this dude is a good football player. He's solid. Round 3 feels like a really nice place to take him. Plug and play starter. And, you know, the Colts offensive line was a little disappointing last year. Still solid, I think, especially after interim head coach Jeff Saturday took over, obviously an area of his expertise. But, yeah, I think they can certainly be better there. And I think adding Ekiyor makes that unit that much better. So then we get to the Steelers at pick 80, and a little bit of a project move here, especially for a team that kind of needs a linebacker immediately. Devin Bush, a free agent. Miles Jack, I don't know if they're going to keep him around for much longer. But DeMarvion Overshown is my guy. He was preseason top 5 linebacker for me. He'll probably be in the same spot again this year. If not, he'll be number 6. But man, you know, 6'5", 240, 245, safety turned linebacker, and you feel that speed. He cleaned up on the missed tackles. That's the biggest thing. It's like, he was a guy preseason I was like, man, if he improves the tackling, this guy could become a freak. Only 5 missed tackles this year, and like 4 came in 1 game. So this is a guy who I think has really taken strides to become a better tackler. Now, sure, he could play run fits better. You know, that's that next step, right? Like, you ensure you're tackling, and then you have to learn how to play those lanes and become a better run defender. But I'm seeing a safety turned linebacker at 6'5", 245 pounds that flies over the field and has become a better tackler. that sounds like a project at linebacker I am absolutely looking to take. And for Pittsburgh, a team that's kind of known for, linebacker history, I'd be really interested to see if they did make this selection, and that type of legacy that kind of comes with it, if it did work out. Because if it did, God, he'll be special if he does take that next step forward in the NFL. 81, we're going to go with the Detroit Lions. This is the interior offensive lineman. I thought I was going to give it the Titans, so I am sorry, Titans fans, for again teasing you, but this is also a guard I think is very uniquely a Titans player, so maybe I'll make this happen in next week's mock. But Antonio Mafi, a mauler. This guy at UCLA, the best thing in his profile is his ability to play with strength, and his run blocking game. There's still some work to be done as a pass blocker, but this is a Lions team, Big V. You got Jonah Jackson. You got some solid guards, but both eventually coming up on the end of their contracts here, not too distant in the future. So I can totally see this being an area where they want to find either the next starter, or they just look at Antonio Mafi and they're like, yeah, well, we drafted Bijan at 18. Like, Mafi, this sucks. I'm sorry, Lions fans. I can't believe I'm saying this, but Mafi's a kneecap biter. Like, this is the dude. This is the type of tone you want to have across the offensive line. So, pardon that type of lame analysis, but this dude is mean. He moves people, and he is a force in the run game. That kind of feels like what Detroit's identity wants to be. They want to hurt people, and Mafi is certainly capable of doing that. So I'd be really interested to see if they would take a shot on him here in the third round. Next is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I've been looking for them to add edge. I've had some Bucs fans say, yeah, it's not really the biggest need, but I've also had Felix and Anudike-Uzomah go as high as very early second round, like pick 33. So I think you're getting good value here at 82. He's fallen a little bit down my board, but just because he's a little small, maybe not as good as I thought he would be this past year, but he still has an explosive get off, and that type of twitch off the line is a great first place to begin. Won't give you much in regards to run defense, but I think having him as your DPR, kind of think about Nick Benito. He was drafted at the end of the second round last year for the Broncos, and he was just going to be a specialist right away, and then we'll see where it goes. This guy playing behind Shaq Barrett and Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, who I'm excited about, and I think we'll take a step forward in year 3. I think him as a DPR right away gives you that extra pass rush juice I think this team has been looking for a little bit now. Next up, Seattle Seahawks. This is where I'm going to go with that interior offensive lineman I was talking about earlier on. That's just solid, stable. Like Jaret Patterson, there is nothing about him, and I'm a Notre Dame fan, by the way. There's nothing about him that screams like, dude, this is a guy. Like, you gotta draft him early. Like, the traits are there, the athletic ability, there's something to build on. And even with like Mafi, it's like, dude, with that type of play strength and ability and like desire to hurt people, like, interesting. I'm here for it. Or like Cody Mock, it's like, that dude flies, and he's new to the position. There's something to tap into there. Jaret Patterson, multi-year starter across the interior offensive line at Notre Dame. Solid, pretty good at pass protection, good enough strength to move people. And then for Seattle, it's like, hey, you already drafted O'Cyrus Torrence to be that left guard. I'm thinking Jaret Patterson can become that center of the future. Maybe he plays the other guard spot, but hey, multiple interior offensive linemen. I told you in the round 1 video that I think it's in the cards. I'd rather see it be first and fourth round as those picks versus first and third, but it kind of feels very Pete Carroll and John Snyder. And there's potentially 3 starting spots open for grabs. So let's go ahead and grab 2 guys that could potentially become starters in the NFL draft, kind of like they did last year with tackle in the first and third with Charles Cross and Abe Lucas. Okay, next up, the Miami Dolphins. I'm going to go Jalen Duncan here. The thing you like most about Duncan's game is his athletic ability. So I think in a gap scheme, he's really interesting to think about as that right tackle because this dude can move. Kind of like I talked about DeJuan Jones yesterday, and I was like, yeah, but he's this big, tall, lumbersome power tackle. I think, Justin Fields kind of hides some of his weaknesses, but the ability to move may not be there. Well, I am not concerned about that with Jalen Duncan. Now, he didn't take the step forward I was hoping for this year at Maryland, so a little bit of a downer there. But nonetheless, this dude is, as an athlete and at this rate, it can't get worse than Austin Jackson. It can't get worse than Brandon Shell. It can't get worse than Greg Little. So I think he's certainly worth a shot here in the third round. And you could be getting it. And I think Todd McShay has him as a top 5 offensive tackle in this year's class. There's plenty of people who love Jalen Duncan. I'm just a little bit lower on him. But hey, I think here, Miami, third round, chance to get a very athletic, good fit for that offense, that blocking scheme as your potential right tackle of the future. You jump all over it. So now we've gone running back, tight end, and tackle. This team does have defensive holes and some needs on that side of the ball. But yeah, it's just so much more fun to go offense heavy for a team that already has a crazy offense. So that's kind of what I've been doing here for Miami. Let's talk about the Chargers here at 85. I'm going to go Henry To'oTo'o. Now, I'm not very high on To'oTo'o, and I actually talk about some of these linebackers here. We're going to talk about one of the guys that's still showing here in Ivan Pace. But To'oTo'o is just a guy who, not a high-end athlete, but can wear the green dot. I trust this guy to be the guy getting the calls from the sideline. Multi-year starter, both at Tennessee, then at Alabama. Good run defender, fill those lanes, kind of stuff we're talking about. Overshown doesn't do yet. solid in cover. Like, I feel like he knows where he wants to be. So in a zone heavy scheme, I think he could maybe fare well. And the Chargers run a decent bit of that. But like mano a mano, like him against tight ends, it's not gonna be great. Him against running backs, he could get picked on there. He's just solid. He's the Jarrett Patterson of the linebacker class in a lot of ways. And here in the third round, as you've caught onto this theme, drafting a potential starter and a plug and play dependable dude, that's good value. And I think that's where the strength of this draft class is. The first round, there's not a whole lot of blue chippers. There's a handful. And a couple of them play, one of them plays running back, one plays tight end. So where do you draft that guy? The strength of this class, just like last year, is in the second and third round. That's why I get so excited doing these second and third round videos, because I'm like, this is where teams are really going to find starters and really improve their roster. So Henry To'oTo'o, where the Chargers can get better, I'd love to see this addition. He's not a freak athlete, but he'll do the job. And this team needs to get better against the run. So we went Benton yesterday, Mazi Smith for the Chargers yesterday, and now we're going to go ahead and add Henry To'oTo'o as a linebacker fit. Again, we're trying to improve that run defense. That way we can play those two high shells, keep a safety deep, and really make it hard to pass the ball against that Chargers secondary. Okay, let's move on to the Baltimore Ravens here. Let's go Clark Phillips. I feel like this is just, I'd love to know what the measurements, kind of what are those benchmarks for the Ravens, because this is a team that's just such a good drafting organization. I'd love to learn something, right? So Clark Phillips might not be one of their guys because he's 5'10", 183. He might have this short arm problem, but if he doesn't have those arm length concerns, he could go a lot higher than this. Really good year at Utah. Turnover machine, especially early on in the season. And this is a team that's going to need a starter. Fuller's becoming a free agent. Marcus Peters is a free agent. So adding a guy like this who could become a starter, multi-year starter in college, I feel like this is a guy you could depend on pretty much right away to get out on the field. It comes down to how you feel about his size. I'm a little hesitant. That's why I got him going in the third round. But nonetheless, this could also open up a door for a really solid value. And look at Roger McCreary. Yeah, he got picked on sometimes. He felt the small arms and smaller frames sometimes, but also there were times where it's like, man, this guy's pretty good, and the arm length didn't really show. So maybe Clark Phillips kind of the same thing here for Baltimore. And as promised, for Minnesota, I am going to go corner. I mentioned this on day one. Let's go Jalen Jones, just as a contingency plan if Andrew Booth doesn't take a step forward in year two, or Cam Dantzler battles some injuries or doesn't get any better under Brian Flores. Also, I think he likes these bigger, taller man press type of guys, even though, Xavier Howard's the zone specialist, but I think he likes some size in his corners, and Jalen Jones definitely has that. An intriguing prospect from Texas A&M. Only gave up 10 catches this past year, fun fact, with the Aggies. So also some solid production, some solid stats to glean from, but it's mostly the frame, and I'm really excited to see what the athletic numbers coming in at. But this is just kind of, hey, we're going to add one more guy just in case for Minnesota, or maybe this guy really breaks out and is better than, a third round pick and becomes a starter in his own right. So like the pick there. And then at 88, let's go with a possession type, Michael Wilson. This just feels like the wide receiver I really want the Jags to get. Wilson really put his route running prowess on display too at the Senior Bowl. A guy who, like I said with Tanner McKee, only played 26 games over 5 years with the Cardinals, and only, I want to say 14 of the last 3. Yeah, like it was not a whole lot of playing time. So a lot of that came in 2018, 2019, his first 2 years. And then, yeah, he had a hard time staying on the field. But again, flash to the Senior Bowl, showcase route running, 6'2", over 200 pounds. I think he could just be that possession type. And then Calvin Ridley becomes that deep route runner, that over-the-top threat. We added Luke Musgrave yesterday to be the tight end, maybe paired up with Evan Ingram or just replacing him. And then Christian Kirk works from the slot, and he does a lot of different things and can be just kind of the go-to target when Trevor Lawrence needs to win. He can trust Christian Kirk. You kind of saw that on display last year. So Ridley is the over-the-top guy. Wilson is the X. Kirk is a little bit of do-it-all from the slot. And then tight ends, however it plays out, Musgrave, Ingram, or just Musgrave and ETN. We're putting together a really solid ecosystem around Trevor Lawrence. Wish it could have addressed offensive line, but we got him pass catchers instead. Maybe you do all the offensive line legwork in free agency. Next to the Giants here at 89. Actually, he wasn't on your screen. I went back and checked in OBS. He was on your screen. But Ivan Pace is going to be the pick here for the Giants. Man, I just love this. He put another guy who showcased really well at the Senior Bowl. Man, a stun of a blitzer. I really don't know if you get a whole lot more than that, but for Wink Martindale, I like how we added Tyree Stevenson, this nice man press type of corner. Perfect fit for Wink. Ivan Pace with his blitzing ability is a perfect fit for what Wink Martindale wants to do. So we've gone kind of defensive heavy here on day 2 between the second round video yesterday and the third round video today. We're going to go interior offensive line with the next pick. But man, Ivan Pace and a middle linebacker blitz heavy scheme for Wink Martindale. This could be the right place for Ivan Pace, and it could be the exact right fit that Wink Martindale is looking for. And I think the value matches up really well. Dallas at pick 90. I'm going to go running back Zach Charbonnet. And this is with the mind set that they'll release Zeke Elliott which probably won't happen, which I understand is probably unrealistic for me to expect here in the middle of February. Whatever, it's all good. It's what I would do. It's what I would do. I'd cut Zeke, draft Zach Charbonnet, who I think is going to run 4.5s. He's really not as slow as, his big frame would make you think, and actually has pretty solid one cut ability. Like, that's the thing though. He only gets one cut. Like, this guy plants his foot, moves in that direction, and that's all you got. And then it's power. And then it's all power. But nonetheless, his explosiveness out of that one cut, and because he does have good 40, I think he will run a pretty decent 40. Once he gets going, good luck bringing him down. He is mean. He's got a good stiff arm too. So really like this fit. And if you franchise tag Tony Pollard, you got one guy for the power, that's Charbonnet, one guy for the dash, that's Pollard. I mean, that's a really nice 1-2 punch. And, Charbonnet, even with the dead cap hit that comes with Zeke Elliott, is cheaper long term than Zeke Elliott. So I also like it there a lot. We're actually going to have a little bit of a run on running backs here. Let's get to the Bills here. Let's go Tui Tuipulotu. I decided to do this because, you think back to the game against the Bengals in the playoffs, and it's like, yeah, maybe it's the snow, maybe it's the cleats, maybe. It's just like, man, when Von Miller went down, because the reason I don't buy it is because, like, when Von Miller went down in the regular season, the pass rush dissipated. It evaporated in the snap of a finger. The second Miller went down, it was gone. So I just think it's a problem. Like, I think they just need to continue to address it. So Tui Tuipulotu also comes with inside-out versatility. So in pass situations, when you're going nickel, going dime, four-man fronts, I think Tuipulotu could kick inside and be a pass-rushing DT, lined up over a guard center. Or, when you're in your base, he kicks out and plays out wide. So he's 6'4", 290. So I'm kind of thinking 3-4 DN, 4-3 D tackle. Again, going to those nickel sets, kind of that 4-3, four-man front D tackle. But then also can play on the edge. So kind of gives you some nice versatility there for the Bills. But it's just, hey, clearly without Von Miller, we need to get better here. So let's continue to address it. And I think Tuipulotu brings you some good value here. Next up is the team that beat the Bengals in that playoff game, the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Mixon's a really interesting cut candidate. And next week I may well have Bijan Robinson fall all the way to them in the first round. We'll see. We'll see how I'm feeling and kind of what I'm thinking going up into that one. But Tank Bigsby in the third round, man, that could be scary. I felt like his footwork was a lot better this year. It was a lot less of him tripping over himself. He just kind of stayed upright a lot more. And he's got a really awesome blend of speed and power. And he, just like Charbonnet, has a mean one-cut ability. So, if they do move on, or cut Joe Mixon, Tank Bigsby, I think, makes a lot of sense and gives you some of those same stuff. Not nearly the pass catcher that Joe Mixon can be, but you got Samaje Perine for that. So I can see where Bigsby kind of handles the running duties, and then Perine kind of becomes the third down guy. Or they give Chris Evans, more of that role. The guy they drafted, I think day 3 out of Michigan a couple years ago. Yeah, he was a guy I liked a ton. I liked Chris Evans a fair amount as a sleeper sleeper running back. He gives you that receiving ability. So maybe it's Evans taking over the receiving ability and Tank being the main bell cow when it comes to running the ball. So let's talk about the Carolina Panthers now at 93. I'm gonna give you a true deep free safety. I'd love to see this team add a true free safety and then have Jeremy Chin continue to play that hybrid, slot corner, strong safety role. I think that's where his skill set's best suited. And then Brandon Joseph, this guy who's cleaned up his tackling during his time at Notre Dame, which was great. That was kind of his big flaw while at Northwestern. But yeah, really instinctive, solid athleticism, can cover a lot of ground. And I think, again, as the true free safety, he fills that role that I think Carolina should add. Now, that said, it's going to be interesting with adding Ejiro Evero, probably a lot of cover 4, a lot of too high looks. So maybe you bring back some of the safeties from last year, or maybe you're adding a guy in free agency. Maybe it is just re-signing Xavier Woods. I could see Woods and and Joseph being your deep safeties, and then Chin playing in the box more. So it'll be interesting to see when you go from playing more those cover 3 looks, those single high shells, into more cover 2 shells. But it'll be interesting to see how that safety transition plays out. But nonetheless, I think they can get a safety. I think Brandon Joseph here at 93 is a really solid addition. Let me get to the Philadelphia Eagles at 94, and as promised, we're gonna have another running back here. This is gonna be Sean Tucker. I mean, maybe the best speed to power ability in this draft class. A little bit of a disappointing year this year at Syracuse, but I think just kind of the situation around him got a little muddied. I kind of comp it to Jahmyr Gibbs when he was at Georgia Tech. Felt like he was trying to win the game for Georgia Tech. Then he goes to Alabama, and I called him my preseason number 2 running back, and I'm sticking to that, and I still think he is the second best running back in this class because he got to Alabama and it's like, oh man, I don't have to win these games. I'm just going to follow my blocks, I'm going to trust my vision, and I'm going to trust my speed, I'm going to trust my elusiveness, and I'm a good receiver. I don't think Tucker gives you the receiving ability, but now I could see at the NFL level, especially if he goes to a team like Philadelphia, because Miles Sanders is a free agent, Boston Scott's a free agent. Like I was saying last week about Bijan Robinson running behind that offensive line, Sean Tucker can just drop his shoulders, relax, and be like, I play behind maybe the best offensive line in football. I'm going to hit the hole and go. And again, that speed to power is scary. So especially behind an offensive line that could give him 4 or 5 yards of a head start before he gets touched. Yeah. I mean, that Philadelphia offense is already really good. You give him Sean Tucker behind that O-line, And they get that much scarier to me. And they get cheaper at running back, which is obviously a big plus in my opinion. Then Kansas City at 95. So I thought about Michael Wilson maybe at the end of the second round. Decided to wait. Let's go Rashee Rice. Can be that big body, contested catch type of guy. He's a little tough because I generally look positive on him at his time at the Senior Bowl. That said, he's a guy who wants to initiate contact, but doesn't lose or shed that defender. Well, it's not like he can lose that guy. A lot of times you'll see guys who want that, and then they're able to beat it. Rashee Rice leaves a little bit of desire there, but I also think if you understand what he is Devontae Parker. Devontae Parker does not drop people to the field. Like, he does not break ankles. Like, he is not a sharp route runner. Devontae Parker is a guy you throw 50-50 balls to, and maybe a little bit more than 50% of the time he comes down with it. It makes a DB look kind of dumb. That's Rashee Rice to me. So I think of him as kind of this possession receiver. You have MVS as a big body downfield field stretcher. Then you have Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney as these twitchy gadgets, after they catch guys. We also added Parker Washington earlier on. So we're doubling up here at receiver, and maybe that's not the best thing Kansas City can do, but if this team gets more offense, that is not a bad thing. And also, like, staying cheap at receiver when you have to pay Patrick Mahomes so much money, I think it's an interesting way to combat some salary cap troubles that you're naturally going to have when you have an expensive quarterback. So, like the Ravens always draft edge rushers, and that's how they kind of stay cheap and battle the cap. And that's why their defense is always, pretty well stacked with talent because they're relatively cheap at, edge. They go rookie or they go with, a Justin Houston on a cheap contract. And I could see maybe Kansas City wants to do that with wide receiver because you got Patrick Mahomes and he'll make a lot of people look good. Anyway, I talked about that for way too long. The Cardinals then at 96. I'm going to go back to the interior offensive line as promised. I'm actually going to take a guy that's classified as a guard and Chandler Zavala. I think he probably is going to be better off at the NFL level if he's playing guard. Maybe they did move him to the interior offensive line. Hold on, now I gotta try to find him. But nonetheless, I think here for the Cardinals, this probably becomes your left guard upgrade. Oh my goodness, I cannot find my man. There he is. This is like your left guard improvement. Obviously, with Justin Pugh hitting free agency, also you have Will Hernandez becoming a free agent, and then we drafted John Michael Schmitz earlier on to be the center of the future. So I could see this just like Seattle being a team that doubles down there on the interior offensive line because it is a big hole, and also for Arizona first-year head coach, you kind of want to build through the trenches. I talked about that a little bit in yesterday's video. So next is the Washington Commanders at pick 97. Let's go with Riley Moss. Kind of an interesting fit. At the Senior Bowl, he was doing really well in the one-on-ones. But Iowa's a team that historically is very zone-heavy, but he's got the size. I think he's going to run really well, and he comes from that zone-heavy team, so I feel comfortable if he goes into a zone-heavy defense, but also him winning those one-on-ones, which is naturally man-to-man. I'm thinking this is a sneaky late day 2, early day 3 type of corner you can add. So I like Riley Moss and the value that Washington gets here. And like I said in yesterday's video, I'd like to go corner in the first 2 rounds, but if you wait to the third and get a sleeper here like Riley Moss, I think that might be able to do the justice. Now, can he see the field immediately? Is he the right-away starter paired up with Benjamin St-Juste? Maybe not, but I think this is a project worth taking on here towards the end of the third round, just before pick 100. So now at pick 98. So I've been going IDL then wide receiver for Cleveland. Decided to do the opposite here, wide receiver then IDL. But a guy that I was really excited about coming into the season was Jaquelin Roy. I am going to go Jaquelin Roy over Gervon Dexter just because I think Roy right now maybe gives you a little bit more of a floor. He was solid. He was a good pass rusher. He was a good run defender. But nothing else. Like, I was always kind of waiting for Jaquelin Roy to be like, oh, yep, he's taking games over. I thought this would be the year. Mason Smith, one of the top tier IDL prospects for 2024, missed the entire season. I was like, all right, Jaquelin Roy is about to ball out this year, and he was solid. He's dependable. It's like, yeah, he's playing good, but he's just not taking this game over. So I think here in the third round, a guy who can be a solid improvement over your current defensive tackle room, which I would argue is the worst in the NFL. Okay, good. That's an upgrade. And maybe they can figure out that potential and tap into it and get that much more out of him. But also a guy who, again, stopped the run at a pretty good level and was a good pass rusher. So if he stops the run at a good level, you're automatically getting a much-needed boost there in the middle of the Browns defense. But also, if he brings that pass rush upside, that's giving some help to Myles Garrett, which certainly would go a long way. All right, 4 picks to go. San Francisco at pick 99. I'm going to go with Nick Broker. He actually was in the tackles in that one. I can't confirm. I also think he'll be better off at guard. Just good, solid experience at Ole Miss and a solid player. I think that, again, just profiles a little bit better at guard. As much as I like Aaron Banks coming out of Notre Dame, I don't think San Francisco was the right fit for him. I do think of him more in a Tennessee or Baltimore offense, kind of playing that man blocking scheme versus the gap. So he kind of feels like the odd man out. There's also, I think, really all 3 the offensive line spots, maybe not at center, but both guard spots are potentially up for grabs for San Francisco. So Nick Broker, I think, could fill in and be a right-away starter there on the interior. So next up, the Giants at pick 100. Let's go with Curtis McClendon. This is where, I need to do a little bit more on the interior guys, but, I think this is going to be the part of the draft where we start seeing a whole lot of offensive linemen come off the board, so this is where I need to start doing a little bit more digging. Who are those names going to be? Curtis McClendon, I think, he is out of Chattanooga. I believe he was Todd McShay's top 5 interior offensive lineman, so I am kind of going off of that more than something I can report myself, which I don't like doing often, but I'll go off, some love that other people have for him, and also I'm just kind of running out of names here in the interior offensive line group, so apologies there, but nonetheless, you kind of get the point with John Feliciano hitting free agency. Maybe they bring him back and he become a guard. Maybe they draft a center here instead then, but center and left guard, last 2 spots, I feel like they really can take a big step forward and find an upgrade. Even right guard, honestly, if we're being honest, Mark Lewinsky is fine. He's solid, but it's easier to fill 2 starting spots versus 3, so keep Lewinsky around. He's not making that much money. Let's try to find a guard or a center here at 100. That's kind of what my thinking was. San Francisco, last 2 picks. We're going to go Kai Blue Kelly, another guy who, after day 1, looked pretty good. At the Senior Bowl, him or Darius Rush. I actually was going back and forth between him and Darius Rush. Even Trevius Hodges Tomlinson kind of gives me Jason Verrett vibes, which obviously they kept bringing him back on 1-year deals. So like maybe Hodges Tomlinson. Darius Rush is a kind of a corner that a lot of people have been forgetting about because Cam Smith's really good. But actually Darius Rush is a longer wingspan and actually a couple more interceptions, so even more ball production than Cam Smith had. So all that makes for kind of an interesting prospect and a really fascinating late 3, early 4, kind of where I'm thinking his value's at right now. He makes for an interesting add in that range. But I decided to go Kai Blue Kelly here. Also, it's cool to keep Stanford guy in the Bay Area. So or right there on the West Coast. So that's cool. That's fun. But again, looked pretty good on the 2nd and 3rd day of the Senior Bowl. Solid size, and I think it just makes for a nice fit into that defense. Last pick here at 102. Let me also just show who is still available. The pick is going to be Gervon Dexter here, player number 58. If it's Kyle Shanahan, Devon Achane, he's going to draft a running back somewhere in the top 3 rounds, so it's bound to happen. Tight end depth, maybe. Wide receiver could certainly be in play. They've been kind of looking for another guy in the mix there, but Debo, Brandon Ayuk, I think that's kind of sufficeable. That's enough for that offense. But nonetheless, like I said, it is going to be Gervon Dexter for the pick here. And God forbid that San Francisco gets the opportunity to take a project like Gervon Dexter and just make him an absolute monster. That's the best place for Gervon Dexter to go, and it's good value there at 1 and 2. He could certainly be off the board by that point. A guy who always showed flashes at Florida, you saw the frame, you saw the size, you saw the power from time to time, but it's why can't this guy really put it all together? And like Jaquelin Roy we talked about earlier, he was still a solid, dependable player. Dexter, kind of left me he's okay. He's better at the NFL level. I felt like every Florida game, that's what I was saying about Gervon Dexter versus Jaquelin Roy. I was he's a good player. So if you were just curious why I went Roy over Dexter there and why Dexter fell all the way down to 102, that hopefully explains it pretty well. But going ahead and scrolling through all 3 rounds of this updated 2023 mock draft. Apologies for all my tangents and rants here, especially in the day 3 video. I feel like I got a little long-winded there, but nonetheless, hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new and want more mock draft content in your life. And of course, the most important thing you can do, let me know what your thoughts are down below in the comment section. Who's your favorite team? What'd you think of the haul? Whether you want to talk about all 3 days or just here and the 3rd round, and you want to go back and comment on the 2nd round video and the 1st round video, I'd love if you did that. That'd be great. But however you want to let me know your thoughts, I'd love to hear it. And as long as you're not an asshole, I respond to just about every comment down below in the comment section. So let me hear your thoughts. Let's talk some football down below. That's the reason I started this channel. But that is going to do it. Sorry for all the tangents once more, but until next time, my name is Teach, and I'm signing off.